Welcome to episode 16, would you believe, of Property Avenue WA. He's Oscar D'Souza. I'm Tony Viner, sometimes called TV. And this is your avenue to matters property in WA. It's all focused about Western Australia. We do chat about a variety of things. Last week, fabulous response last week. We had people asking questions. People want to know why I was moving around all the time. I couldn't keep up with the questions. It was fabulous. So we hope you can join us this week and play a part. Oscar, who's got a huge background as real estate, property management. What else is there? There is auctioneering, there's license valuation, and then, of course, my background in conveyancing and finance. So we'd like to think that we cover most things, and we just have a variety of questions. This week, we're going to obviously have OD's update, his what's been happening for the week. We're going to discuss a few different things. We don't have a guest this week. The guest we did have planned, he had a shoulder reconstruction yesterday, so we thought we'd hold him off for another week. But we've got a few things that we're going to discuss, including first home buyers, and we'll cover that again next week as well. And then we've got a few different things, and of course we're going to always like to finish off with an if question. So, OD, how's the week? Welcome.
Welcome. Thanks, TV. Mate, I'll get straight into it. Really busy week for me. And as we discussed off air, really busy week for you as well. But I may as well just get straight into the stats for the real estate market. Pretty much Perth is what it is that I'm covering. But Perth, as I have said before, is a very buoyant market in both the sales and rentals area. And that's also reflective of what's happening around the state as well. So in terms of trends, anything that I talk about in the rental market or the selling market in Perth is exactly what's going on in the regions as well. Okay, so sales...
Before I interrupt you, sorry, before I interrupt you, remiss of me to make mention, remember we said we probably need to consider the general advice disclaimer.
Oh, yeah.
So everyone is aware of what we do. We try to give as much information to Curl, but as a general advice disclaimer, the information on this podcast is regarded as general advice. Your personal objectives, needs, and financial circumstances were not taken into account when preparing this content. We recommend that you consider the suitability of this general advice in respect of your objectives and financial assistance. So just be aware that obviously, as we always say, get the right advice. We're here to give an opinion. We give the information we have, but you're always welcome to get that professional advice, which is super important. Okay, ID, sorry, mate.
That's okay. Okay, so another busy week in the Perth sales market. As we know, a normal market for us is anywhere between 500 and 600 sales over the course of any 1 week, and that's throughout the Perth metropolitan area, and that is made up of houses, units, but also blocks of land as well. Last week we had 855 sales, so obviously well above what we consider a normal market. But as we've also discussed, the last 4 to 6 weeks has been red hot since the break of COVID, the easing of restrictions and the ability for people to get out and look at homes and provide offers as well. So 4 weeks ago, we had 1,275 sales, which is double. It is literally 100% increase on what our normal market would be in terms of the volume of sales. And just in terms of that normality, what we consider a normal market. So this time 12 months ago, we were at 592 sales for the week. So that's in the zone of what we consider to be a normal market. That was 12 months ago. Again, this week just gone in real time, 855 sales. And 4 weeks ago, when we were absolutely off the Richter, 1,275 sales. But as we know, I'm more in touch with the rental market these days, and there is a relationship obviously between the rental and sales market, but I spend more of my time in the rental market, and just like the sales market, it's very buoyant market conditions right now. The Perth vacancy rate sits at about 2.3%. I think that the next time that vacancy rate is done, we're going to see that sharpen even more, just because I know, and I'm dealing with the day-to-day, the volume of rentals that we're renting every week is anywhere between 800 to 1,000 rentals a week. At the moment.
Metro area, is that right? That's the metro area?
Yeah, through the Perth metropolitan area. Yeah, anywhere between 800 to 1,000 rentals a week. And we've been consistently that for, I'd probably say the last 6 months, maybe towards the end of last year as well, but for the last 6 months. So that's a very good, strong market for us. 12 months ago, there were just over 7,000 available rental properties in Perth. As at today, 3,555. So pretty much on within the space of 12 months. So at 7,000, that was a pretty good market, probably where the supply was quite close to what the demand is. So that was a good stable level. But now the demand has well outstripped the supply. And as I said, 3,500 rentals is what we've got. It was only a couple of years ago that we were well in excess of 10,000 rentals. So we've got a very, very tight rental market. And I put on my Facebook page, I think just during the week, there was a article in the West Australian that was talking about the rental market and how Perth is actually bucking the national trend. So whilst national statistics are actually showing a retraction in the volume of transactions and also some of the values, Perth is going the other way, which is not great for the rest of the country. And obviously we know what's going on so far as Victoria and New South Wales is concerned. But so it's not great on that front. But from a Perth property point of view, we've been waiting for a long time. Whilst other markets have been fluctuating and rising, Perth really hasn't been doing a lot. So it's been welcome news to see that we're actually getting some growth in our market. RP data report that was out just last month showed that we had a monthly rise in rents of 0.3%. Over the quarter, it was 0.9%, and over the 12 months to now, it was a 2.2% increase in rents, which is, I guess, as we'd expect, because when we see the supply tighten up, whether it's in the rental market or in the sale market, that normally means that when supply tightens up but we've got a strong level of demand, that does place an upward pressure on value. So that's exactly what we've seen. In contrast, nationally, falls of 0.3% over the month, 0.5% over the quarter, and 0.7% over the year. So absolutely, Perth is bucking the trend. And as I said, we're still leasing, circa 900 properties each week, and we've seen that the available rentals drop a great deal just over the last 6 months, but in particular the last 12 months, it's literally halved over the last 12 months. So we've got some good, strong market conditions here in Perth. And at the moment, I really don't see any reason why that's going to change so far as WA is concerned.
Mate, when you getting back to some of those stats, and particularly you're talking about the sales, are there particular sectors there? Do you have that info as to what areas is that units? Is that townhouses? Is that houses? Is it vacant land, or is it just a broad, a sort of a very broad sort of? There's no specific area that's flying through the roof.
No, there is. I do actually have access to that information. I haven't got those stats in front of me right this second, TV, but I will say that of that 900 sales, about 550 of them is houses, and of the balance 400, about 200 of them are units and 200 of them are vacant blocks of land. So that's basically about the distribution that we've got. It will be around about 60% in house sales, 20% in units, and 20% in land. And I'd also add that since the federal and state government incentives for building have been introduced over the last couple of months, that component of land that now sits at 20%, that has risen a great deal to 20%. Prior to that, land was actually quite difficult to move, and I would have thought land as a percentage of total sales would probably represent somewhere between 4 and 10%. So we've seen a massive increase in the demand for land as a result of the federal and state government incentives for building new homes.
Yeah. Well, and actual fact, at one stage, I know we had Dion, our CEO for the AICWA, on a few weeks back now, and I know we were talking about, the incentives that were there for the land was well and good, but perhaps we need to entertain incentives for the first home buyer, and maybe even more so. And I think you and I also had this discussion, perhaps an incentive for the over 60s where people are downsizing and give them that flexibility with, as we discussed. But interestingly, I'm sure that stimulus I think is still something that should be entertained, but it's interesting how the market is moving, even so, without those incentives. So, and I know, as I said to you before we went on air, the inquiries I've had for people just for general advice and consulting needs, and a bit of direct. In fact, before we came on air, before you and I touch base, I've already had an inquiry about someone who said, I don't even know where to start because they're buying in Perth. And admittedly, my conveyancing business, it's as I call the processing centre, is in Geraldton, but we can do work anywhere in WA. But it's just interesting. People are not so much about conveyancing, yes, but asking for advice and asking some direction. So there's people that haven't had that opportunity to get into the market before, and here it is. This is a real opportunity at the moment.
Yeah, look, and I think one of the things that it's about, okay, so what is fueling the market? And one of the things that I would say is that if in the investor market's been pretty quiet over the last 2 to 3 years, and that's because we haven't had the rental returns there to support it. So these days, people are looking at real estate investment, and I've actually got a segue that I'm going to go into with this, but when people are looking at real estate investment, not their own home, but when they're looking at investment properties, they need to have a good rental market in order to support the returns that they need to make it worth their time. So we haven't really seen that over the last 3 or 4 years, but certainly in the last 12 months, or maybe the last 12 or 18 months, with an increased level of demand, therefore a fall in supply, and now an upward pressure on rents, that actually makes it a better investment so far as servicing the any mortgages, or just achieving that weekly cash flow, because that weekly cash flow increases, all on the back of exceptionally low interest rates. So it's actually a really good environment for investors, for those that are looking to invest in property. I dare say that with other, when people are looking around the country in terms of, so where's the next, people talk about, so where's a good place to buy, or where's the next good place to buy? A lot of people in the eastern states, particularly New South Wales and Victoria, would be looking at their rental market compared to our rental market, and they'd be looking at our market now saying, well, now's a really, really good time to buy over there, because you know that if you're going to have any vacancy period at all, it'll be a very short-term vacancy period, and rent will continue to rise.
And if you're an eastern states person that may be listening to this, because don't forget, it's not a local product. It's all about WA, Western Australia property. It's not about a specific area. But if you are an eastern state and you've logged into this, and I have had people that have contacted me from the East Coast, there is a different process here in WA to what it is in the East Coast. There's no cooling off period. The conveyancing process is quite different. And so is the buying process. And I know that I've been dealing with some clients, and they didn't even, when I brought to their attention a range of things that are required to be done, and some things they do there that we don't do here, they went, whoa, hang on, we I think we'll employ your services to help us, not just to do the conveyancing, but to give us some direction before we put pen to paper. So there is that need out there, because it's interesting as to, and I don't know how many weeks ago it is now, but I know when we spoke to Henry Van Thiel in Geraldton, and he was saying then how much inquiry he was getting from the East Coast, just his office at Ray White. So it's very intriguing. Just when you mentioned also about rent, I spoke to someone during the week from Karratha, and I'd love to get someone, perhaps we try and get hold of a real estate person or a connection up that way, and get a perspective of what's going on up in the northwest, because the comment made to me was, the rental market up there is starting to increase again, because remember, it used to be crazy rental, weekly rentals. But the other part being is that people can't get property up there. And one of my ex-staff, she now lives up there, and she was only saying yesterday that they were so fortunate that they went when they did, because they've got people who have gone up there employed with Rio, and they are still waiting to get accommodation because there's just no accommodation available. So they've got temporary accommodation, but from what Kerry was telling me, that's still an issue. So we perhaps might need to try and get a perspective from what's going on in the Northwest, we'll try and get hold of someone as a guest in the next week or two or three.
Yeah. There's some very good real estate people up there that are on the ground doing the deals and dealing with the inquiry day to day. So I think that would be a great idea, TV. And just so far as you mentioning, we might see some growth or it might be heating up. There's no might. It already has happened, and it's just about where it's going to stop as well. So it's a highly volatile or demand-driven market up there that is highly sensitive to what's happening in the mining industry. And we saw it absolutely boom after 2010, and it went all the way up to 2014, 15, and house prices, rental prices were ridiculous. Like it was just so phenomenal what was happening.
It was crazy.
We had an iron ore price drop or plummet, and that meant there was a lot of change in mining activity up there as well, and house prices reflected that as well. So, but now it's bounced back up again, and we just had a look at. I think the news last night was the iron ore price reaching $111 an ounce or something like that. And it wasn't that long ago that it was down at 50 and $60 a ton. So
I'll just tell you the secret. If it's $111 an ounce, mate, there's going to be some very, very happy people.
Sorry, a ton.
A ton.
I was thinking about gold touching.
Yeah. I'm thinking, I think we might start investing in iron ore. No, it's interesting. Really, really interesting times. And I think the other thing with regard to what we're talking about is that, people that want to get into market, this is an opportunity because not only that, interest rates, see the Reserve Bank again yesterday, they're still, at a low. What is it, 2%? I think some lenders are even offering less than that at the moment. So, that's affordable. And I don't think with the way the world is going, that's not going to take a massive climb in a big hurry with what's going on the East Coast and what's happening in the world in general. So it's an opportunity. It really is an opportunity.
Yeah. Hey, TV, so I mentioned that I was leading. The reason why I was talking was I wanted to lead into a bit of a segue into home ownership or maybe not home ownership. And what I mean by that is, what is the great Australian dream? Stereotypically, what's the great Australian dream?
You asking me that question?
I'm asking you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's, to me, it's obvious that hence we do what we do now. I think the dream is to people to have their own home, and that is, people. You see adverts in the paper. You see people advising. Don't rent. Why waste money on rent? Why not buy a home? So I think that is. And I think as a little kid, I certainly in my stage in life, I know we as kids, my mum and dad, we lived in state housing and we rented. But Dad's drive was to have our own house, and that was put to us as well.
And so, because I agree with you. So that is, always that's certainly what I was brought up with as well. Buying your first home and then maybe getting an investment property and all that. So why? Why is it that's where I'm going with this is I'm just challenging or wanting to throw out there that maybe the great Australian dream that has been the way that it has for the last 4 or 5 decades is not what it is not really what it is today.
You don't think it is today?
Let me say, renting is not a bad word. And when I say, so why is it that people want to own their own home? What's that great Australian dream about? What I'm asking is it to own your own home, to pay down the mortgage, and then to be in your own home and say, that's my own home and it's worth $500,000 or whatever, and that's mine. And no matter what happens, that's always going to be mine? Or like what's the purpose of it?
Well, I think some people when you talk to there's that thing of, well, if I buy my own home, I don't have to worry about someone else telling me what to do and what I can do and can't do. I Oh, look at this. All right, welcome, Laura, one of our regulars. She's back on board. She's got a little comment. And one of our new people, Betty Mears, she's just sent here people, so they are suggesting so they don't have to rent. Betty's sort of saying so they can pay off their own mortgage rather than paying off someone else's. So that's a couple of people that have just made their observation of the question you're asking. And I'm a bit like Betty. That seems to be the conversation when people have talked to me over the years, even in my banking days. The scenario was, well, what am I paying someone else's loan off for when I could have my own? Some people have sort of gone, well, I'm a bit over it being no guarantees that suddenly they sell the house and then I've got to look for something else. I've got to move again. Some people sort of turned around and went, oh, well, I'm a bit over having to have inspections all the time and people checking on where I live. I've got my youngest brother who is more than happy to rent, more than happy. Has no drive. I've sort of said to him many a time, mate, would you like some assistance or direction? He lives on his own. He's happy renting. He said, it's good with me. I know where I am. He's been in the one place for a long time. He's obviously a good tenant. And so he's got no drive. So he's probably outside of my circle of friends. He's one of a few.
So here's the reason why I'm asking the question, and I agree with what Laura's saying, and I agree with what Betty's saying as well, and that's certainly what I've been brought up on, but I'm just looking to think outside the square, and the reason for that is, for the 5 decades between, say, 1960 and 2010, we really did have that regular real estate cycle that every 7 to 10 years you get great growth out of your properties, and often you'd see that those properties would double in value. And I saw my mum and dad do that, and so many people around us, and we had a very consistent, predictable, safe as houses type real estate investment. But then the GFC came along and we got to 2010, and now we're in 2020. And as we all know, real estate or property has not done what it's done. It certainly hasn't doubled in value over the 7 to 10 years the way that it did in the previous decade or the 3 and 4 before that. So I'm looking at it from the point of view of saying, well, if I wanted to have my own home and pay off my own home, a fundamental component of that is so I can build some net wealth, I can build some equity, I can build a net egg for me, my family and all that. And then one day when I'm not here, I've got something good, solid that I can pass on to the kids and they can then build on that. Alternatively, and just looking at the market conditions that we've had over the last 10 years, where it's kind of rewritten those history books a little bit, I, myself as an individual, I sit there and go, well, hang on, if I'm actually looking to add to my balance sheet and improve my net wealth, me personally, where I think I'll actually be able to do that these days and be far more successful at it, is probably in business, where I look at a business that I can build that can generate a cash flow, obviously profitability, and then also it's going to have a worth or a value, so that when I go to sell it, then someone's going to pay me, some money for that, because I've proven that it's a sustainable business and it's got a cash flow as well. So if I chose to rent for the next 2 or 3 years, and all I had to pay was my $500 a week, as an example, I never had to pay building insurance. I never had to pay shire rates or water rates. Yes, I'd have to have someone come through and do inspections and all that. I almost wouldn't have to pay any maintenance or any pest control. There's a lot of things that I wouldn't have to worry about. But yeah, I'll have someone every 3 months in my house just looking over the way that I live. But ultimately, if you're living the way that you would want to live in your own home and take pride in your own home anyway, the fact that you'd be living in someone else's home and paying off their mortgage or paying your own rent, I would think that your standard of living should be the same anyway. So if you lived well, or if you took pride in your place, whether you owned it or whether you rented it, I would think, you've got to live there every day, so it should pretty much be the same. Or if you lived like a bit of a pig, then maybe that would remain the same as well. So all I'm saying is, from the financial point of view, I think that if part of me owning my own home and watching that appreciate in value is going to improve my net worth, well, the last 10 years has shown me otherwise. And where if I just paid my $400 or $500 a week in rent and used my surplus income or my efforts when I'm actually working towards running a business, building a business, getting a cash flow and building an asset, I think I'd actually be better off. And the final thing that I'd say with that is, if you're anything like my family has been over the last 10 years, staying in the one spot for a long, long time, whether it's all in Perth or around WA, has never really, it hasn't really fitted our mold. So the fact that if we leased a place for 2 years and then the owners had to come along and sell it, and then we had to pick up and move again, in the suburb or a bit closer to the coast or whatever it might be, it's almost like a new experience. Sure, for a week with removalists and cleaning and all that, it's a bit of a pain in the butt. But then you actually get to move to somewhere new, and you didn't have to pay stamp duty along the way. You didn't have to. So, or I'm just trying to throw it out there that if it's solely a financial reason that people want to own their own home, and that's because they want to have a nest egg, maybe that nest egg would be created somewhere else, and better than what property has done for us over the last 10 years.
Right. Well, while you've been saying that, we'll just let you know.
And then
No, wait a minute. Actually, before I go any further, we encourage people to ask questions. And Dino, he's on board. I don't know how he's doing his keyboard. He's had his shoulder reconstruction yesterday. Dino, I hope it all went well, mate. Good to hear you're hearing about. He's made a comment. I'm going to read a few of these comments that have been made for people. He's made a comment. For some, renting provides the ability, don't mind me, I'm looking over a couple of things. Renting provides the ability to live in a location where they may not be able to afford to buy. Example, apartments maybe in South Perth might be an area that they can't afford to buy, but they can rent. He's also made mention that the Great Australian Dream has changed from the quarter acre lot. So what young Australians, I need to fix my microphone, what young Australians look for today is probably a lot different to what it used to be, say, in my time and maybe even your time. Laura's come back and said that renting was perfect for them initially, and she's now getting into her own home until the kids came along. And then they wanted to give the kids that opportunity to have a home that they wanted, and they could grow up in that family home that's their home. It's the family home. And I get that, knowing the family as I do. And I like this. Betty's come along and said, well, that's all well and good, but you can't hang pictures, you can't paint the walls, and you can't make it your own. And that's a fair point. That's a good point. So that's it. That's an interesting. And I know that I've got rental property, and we've had recently someone asking if they could have a dog on the property. Well, personally, we don't want to have a dog. We don't want animals on the property. So there are some things with regard to that, which gets to our point. We don't want to put people off that are trying to buy homes. We're just, the idea of Property Avenue WA is discussing a whole range of things and creating discussion, and that's what we're doing tonight. So if you've got a point of view, then Betty's just come back and said her daughter wants to do more and more as she's getting older. She wants to make her bedroom her own.
Absolutely.
So some really good points.
Yeah, look, I totally agree. And I'm not all for one way or all but I guess what I am suggesting is that I think that the in the square box thinking, certainly when I was growing up, that's just what you do. That you go to school, you go to uni, get your job, you save for your first home, and the sooner you do it, the better. I actually think that it's not in that square box anymore. And there's lots of people, and especially because for me, anyway, when I grew up and the background of where those views were coming from, it was practically all 100% financial. It was for financial reasons to own my own home. But I've, grown and probably had more experience and everything now as well. And also the benefit of the last 10 years or even 10 to 12 years where I've sat there and gone, well, if you look at it on paper, And for example, you look at stockbrokers, like some stockbrokers, and they sit there and go, well, we'd rather have our money tied up in the stock market because we're trading that day to day, and we'll make a whole lot more money in that than if we had that $500,000 tied up in our property. So it's. I just think that people are. I think only because we've had the last 10 years that we have, that has rewritten the rule book a little bit, that people are now think outside the square. And I agree with Dino's comment as well. The whole idea of renting in a location where maybe you would not be able to afford, well, maybe that is something to be considered. Because at the end of the day, we've only got one life, and you don't want to be saving up for 10 years or whatever just to get to that one place, because that 10 years, you might not make it through there. So
now, that being said, we along that angle, we're also got, as I said, it's really very much, you talk about sales and what people buying at the moment, and I'm certainly getting inquiries, but first home buyers. Now, you've been involved in real estate, and you've been involved in property management, and you've been involved in auctioneering. That's your qualifications. Yeah. As a first home buyer, so that they decide, no, rental's not me, I'm going to take that opportunity with the incentives that are available. What are the sort of things, and we'll get Dino on next week because that's his specialty when it comes to finance, but when it comes to our respective fields, what are the sort of things that you would be saying to a first home buyer before they put pen to paper? Let's say they turn around and said, Oscar, I'm looking at buying a block of land, or I want to buy a house. It's my first house. Well, I don't know where to start. What would you be suggesting? Okay.
It's a really, really clear answer from me, TV. And I would say that it's got nothing to do with you and what it is that you do with your time. It just so happens that you do spend a bit of time with first home buyers. But what I would say is get some independent, qualified or experienced advice. So you can, first home buyers, often you'll be talking to your parents, and it wasn't an overnight decision. There's a lot of lead up to it, and I would think in the main your parents only want the best for you, but they also have got a level of experience so far as their life has provided them, versus talking to someone that, number one, is independent and doesn't need to know anything about your background, how you've got to where you are, but is more so focused on the future and where it is that you want to go, to make sure that your decisions match what your goals are. But also someone who is not just independent, but is experienced and does that sort of stuff day to day, because that's where you're going to get your most qualified advice. And some advice you don't need to pay for, and some advice you do need to pay for. But given the sort of money that you need to be spending, which is normally in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's worthwhile spending a bit of money to get some qualified independent advice. Just like when you're sick and you go to a doctor. You go to a doctor and you don't ask mum and dad. Like, you need to get some independent qualified advice. And sometimes a doctor says, go and see a specialist, because they're even more not more independent, but they're more specialised in a certain area. So number one thing, just go and find someone, and it might be a Tony Viner. It might be any other, there's lots of other Tony Viners and everything out there, but go and talk to someone who does it day to day.
Yep. Certainly I've had a number of inquiries with that, and certainly when we get first home buyers that contact us, sort of the first thing say, look, we're not beyond the conveyancing side. I offer an after hours service, as you know, because I think that's missing, because not always are people doing stuff between 9 and 5. Quite often people are entertaining the idea of buying a house or talking to their partner or talking to their parents or whatever is after hours. So that's what I do, certainly what I do. But I think the other things that I sort of entertain with people is having an understanding, I suppose, getting back to what you're talking about even earlier on about rental, when it comes to buying, I know it's easier said than done, but also ensuring that you've got to be careful of the emotion. I've had first home buyers have contacted me and they went, oh, yeah, but we really like the place. And I'm going, yes, I know, but let's take the emotion out of that, because there's this. I mean, we don't physically see the property with what I do. People are asking me my opinion, my advice and direction. But my thinking is you've got to be careful that you, as much as interest rates are low, for example, and as much as there's some incentives available, it's a great opportunity to get in there and perhaps remember how we're talking a few weeks back about negative equity. This is an opportunity, together with what you've already got, together with the incentives that are available. I mean, when you consider the federal government incentive, the state government incentive, as a first home buyer, you can get, if you're buying a block of land, you'll get $10,000. If you're not buying a block of land, you're buying an established home, then there's stamp duty that you're exempt from, up to $430,000. You can buy a good home in the current market, and certainly in regional areas, and certainly even in the metro area. Okay, you're not going to be buying in Cottesloe, but there's opportunity for there, and you can save anything up to $17,000, $18,000, $19,000, $20,000 in stamp duty. So there are some really good incentives, but I'm with you. I think it's the first thing you've got to consider is what can you afford. Don't try and blow the budget. Don't sort of get caught up in the emotion, but then identify what it is you want to do. And then, as you've said, then identify someone who's going to look after you, whether it be the bank manager who's going to look after you with the company of the finance, or you get a finance broker who specialises in that area, can guide you right through and is available outside normal office hours. That, I reckon that's really important this day and age.
Yeah, no, mate, totally agree. And two other things, just whilst you were talking there about first home buyers, two other things popped into my mind. One is for the first home buyer, it's a big thing, you know, to actually go ahead and purchase your first home. And it's something that you should be very proud of doing because it takes a lot of commitment and it takes a lot of guts to actually go along and do something like that. But it also comes with its rewards. So the first thing with regard to your first home, it doesn't need to be your last home. So therefore, it doesn't need to be the best thing in the world. So don't keep saving and saving and saving for your first home being a $750,000 place. You know, get in, get started, make it your own, but it doesn't need to be your last one as well. So use that as a bit of a stepping stone. The other thing about talking to someone independently, and you just touched on it, TV, in terms of affordability, one of the questions, if ever I'm talking to a first home buyer, is I basically say, look, so far as affordability is concerned, let's just assume that home that you want at $400,000, you know what your mortgage repayments and everything are going to be. You know how much money it is that you're earning. Let's just assume that you had that today. And so if you were sitting there in there today talking and you've been to work for the day and you've come home, you walk the dog and all that sort of stuff, what does life look like for you outside of paying that mortgage? Because I've seen it happen before and probably when banks were a bit easier in terms of just, you know, LVRs and serviceability, where people would commit themselves so much because they thought, or they really, really wanted the house so much. And then when they actually got in there, they realized that they're actually a bit cash strapped and they don't have that disposable income that they wanted to enjoy life. Sure, they've got their house and they jumped over that major hurdle and took the plunge, and it was a really, really good idea. But then they almost felt a little bit trapped as well because they didn't have too much money to do anything else, to go on a holiday, to go down south for the weekend, to buy a new whatever. Because the house was taking up a lot of money, not just in mortgage, but in insurance and utilities and all that sort of stuff. So when you talk to someone completely independent and they could ask you that sort of question, you might battle to actually get that question asked from anyone else. So again, just going back to someone who does it day to day.
Betty's also made a comment here with regard to, do you think that now, I don't want a big, long answer, right? We're getting out of time. We've got a few things to cover. But Betty just made a comment that, do you think that owning property now is a lot less affordable for the average person than it was being, or has been in the past 20, 30, 40 years? I'm not sure. I think it's probably a market at the moment. Certainly prices have changed, but I think probably it is a little bit affordable at the moment, certainly with the incentives in the current climate.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, obviously with prices continually going up, but for the last 10 years, I still think that it's affordable and really, really helped on by the interest rates that we've got. We've got an amazing, unheard of interest rate environment, and that really should be taken advantage of as well. So, and particularly if we're talking about Perth, or we're talking about WA, because interest rates, when you have a look at the median house price in New South Wales or Melbourne, is far different. It's far bigger than what it is in Perth. So I still think that Perth is very affordable.
Yep. I can tell you firsthand, as far as regional WA is concerned, certainly Geraldton, for example, in the Midwest region, well and truly affordable. What you can buy, for example, if you're coming over from the East Coast, your eyes will light up when you can see what you can buy and views and being, my God. And I use my mum and dad's house as a classic example. That's recently been sold, but when you compare what that is and what that, be it the metro area or for that matter the East Coast, wow, there's some opportunity. So I think it's very affordable. One of the things that Dino's made mention about regarding first home buyers, he said start off by writing down what is important, the must-haves that you want in the property, and I think that's really important. I know when I got out of the bank and did finance broking initially, when finance broking wasn't what it is today. But the number of people that say, the agent told me or mum and dad told me I need a 4x2 because for resale value. I mean, that's like saying buying a Mercedes instead of a Corona because of resale value. Sort of like, well, what is it you want? And to start off with, I mean, my first home was a 3x1.
I know what your top criteria was. I know.
Pardon?
I know what the top criteria was for your first home.
Yep.
Walking distance to the local. No question. Walking distance to the local. That was surprised there, mate.
Yeah, no, that was probably a little bit. Yeah, it was pretty much. I had walking distance to a couple of locals, so that worked well. For those that don't know what the local is, that's the hotel. So if as a first home buyer, write down what is important and must-haves in the property. Buy a property that suits your lifestyle, which we just talked about then, location and other needs. And if you don't like gardening, then maybe a big block is not for you. And that's a very valid point because all of a sudden, there's some place, particularly in regional, again, WA, you can buy blocks here that are still quarter acre. Now, that's a lot of work to do. I know when we moved up to Geraldton some 20 odd years ago and we looked after a property, brand new home for some friends, and they went up north for a while and we looked after and went, whoa, now I love gardening, but I was still playing sport and I was coaching and my boys were playing sport. Suddenly I had a lot of lawn to mow, a lot of garden to look after because it was brand spanking new. And you go, oh, I couldn't do this on a day by day. My time and my thinking had changed. So it's a really valid point that what Dino is saying about what's important to you and maybe identify that.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. The other thing being is Betty's made comment too. She agrees that after hours, having someone available after hours is super important because they just don't have the time to talk to people during the hours of 9 to 5. So that's what we do. Hey, no other points you would raise this week with regard to first home buyers you're thinking of before we get on to the next point? We're getting out of time.
Oh, yeah, I think we're getting out of time, but I think we've touched on some really good ones and probably not the technical side as well. And so if Dino or whoever's on next week, I think we'll get into a bit more technical first home buyers stuff. Yep.
We'll definitely address some of those things as far as the finance, and also we will ensure we have some pointers down for you next week to discuss that. The other thing that I'll quickly make mention, a lot of people have sort of raised the question with me about hidden costs when buying a property, and particularly first home buyers. To be really, really honest, there's no hidden costs. Simply just go and contact someone like yours truly, or speak to someone, be it your finance broker or be it someone even outside of finance broker. But get someone when you do ask. People sort of say, oh, what are all these fees? There's no hidden, they're not hidden costs. Just be really clear on what is involved in buying a property, not just the settlement process, but also the stamp duty, also your finance costs, insurance costs, and a whole range of things about like getting your phone on, getting your power on, all those things, particularly new homes. So there's no hidden costs. It's a case of doing your homework, in my opinion.
Yep, totally agree.
So, mate, just a quick question with regard to, before we go on to our if question, with what's going on over in Victoria, in particular, do you see that having a negative or a positive impact with the real estate market? Okay, we're going okay in WA at the present time, and dear old Clive, I think that might be petering out, do you think, with regard to his challenge with the borders in WA?
I actually have no idea what's happening with Clive and where that sits with the courts, but I'm happy that ScoMo, for whatever reasons, decided to withdraw from the
Oh, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I mean, it was just, you just don't understand the thinking that they were even supporting that in the first place, but who knows? But so getting back to my initial question, so with what's going on and now in lockdown, Betty said Clive can stay right over there. So getting back to the question about Victoria, do you see that impact? What sort of impact do you see that having as a negative or a positive in the coming months' time? I mean, how long's a piece of string, I suppose, but how do you see that?
You mean in terms of the Western Australian real estate market?
Yes. Yep.
I reckon that there's probably a bit of positive and there's probably a bit of negative, but I actually think each of them will cancel each other out. So the net effect of what we'll see, this is just my view, obviously, but the net effect of what we'll see in WA in terms of the real estate market, so far as what's directly going on in Victoria and possibly New South Wales, I think it won't end up having any material impact whatsoever. Because obviously from the travel point of view, from a migration point of view, from a jobs point of view, all that sort of stuff, that would increase the demand for housing, our neck of the woods. So that would place a bit of an upward pressure on values, I guess, but that can't happen because they're not able to come over here. So, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So that can't have an effect. If there's any financial pressure on those guys over there, and then they've got WA real estate holdings, and then they're going to be forced to sell them to reduce debt, that will increase our supply a little bit, but I think we've got enough demand for that anyway. So yeah, any of the positives, any of the negatives, I actually think they'll balance each other out. And right now we're showing that we're a state on our own and we're quite independent of what's happening over there. So that all said, I really do, and everyone does, really, really do feel for the guys. I deal with a number of clients over that way, and it's a very, very different world and challenging world that they have to deal with. And thoughts, prayers, and everything out to them. That
you don't envy them at all, and you wish them well, and it is sad, but it's interesting. I agree with Betty. I think there are going to be, and I've already experienced that firsthand, I think there's going to be people obviously having to go through quarantine, but I think there's going to be people relocating here in WA from the East Coast, be it for work reasons, be it the fact that they're employed here, they're FIFO workers, for example, turning around and say, hang on, rather than be trying to get backwards and forwards, this ain't going to work. I read a story the other day whereby there was one guy over here, he's been here for months and can't get back to his family, young family over the East Coast, because of the quarantine requirements. Now, that's got to have an impact, and there's got to be some decisions to be made. And as he said, he wasn't whinging about it because he's lucky he's got a job and he's got a livelihood and he can support his family. But what it does do for people like that who are working in WA, it has a massive impact on their family life. And, of course, that must, you would think, encourage some people to say, you know what, we need to make a decision here. We've got a good job. We've got a good environment. Here in WA is in a good place. Maybe we need to relocate, and maybe we need to, if we're going to buy or we're going to rent, WA is the place we do it rather than being too far away from each other. So,
if that places further pressure on the dwindling supply that we've got, both in properties for sale and properties for rent, well, that will, that'll be a good thing for people that are owning properties, because that increased pressure means that eventually the values will start to go up. And when I say eventually the values will start to go up, there's not the data out there to support it. But I think I mentioned last week, this quarter that we're in right now, in fact, even the quarter that we've just finished, being the June quarter, I think we're actually going to show that there's been an increase, a price spike. But definitely in the September quarter, which we're in right now, when that data comes out, no question in my mind, we're actually going to see a decent spike in prices, both in the median rent, but also the median house price. No question.
Mate, we're about to wind up, but I'll just quickly go a couple of, because we really love the fact that people are responding to us and sending us messages. But Betty's made a mention that.
I love Betty.
I
love Betty.
Yeah, I'm a Betty fan. So she just come through, and she just made she knows that we have a skill shortage here with people being stuck over east. And I know I heard the other day they couldn't get people pickers and even to help on market gardens and things of the nature. I deal with a number of Vietnamese clients, and I know they're having difficulties getting people to help them with their market gardens. She also Betty made mention that she's got employees that haven't been home to Queensland since January. And Laura's made mention that she's there's a lot of relocation with FIFO, and FMG have offered help with that, with a lot of that sort of stuff. So that's really interesting information. Betty's also made mention FMG is currently paying for hotel accommodation for people stuck here from the eastern states, and she reckons it won't be long before they encourage relocation, as covering the cost of relocation with some of them might be better off in the dollar run. So fabulous to get all you guys. And Dean Stonehouse said he thinks the drugs are kicking in from his operation, but he reckons, OD, you speak like a true salesman.
I'm a valuer, though. I'm a licensed valuer, which means I'm conservative. And I cover my.
Hey, listen, quickly. Laura just told me today. We got told today that FMG, it cost FMG $18 million for the changes they had to make over the COVID situation. 18 million. That's just one company. Big dollars, mate. Question: if you could, if you were in a movie of your choice, what movie would you choose, and what character would you play?
I'd be Maverick.
Maverick.
Top Gun.
Oh, right.
I'm in love with that movie. All-time favorite. I feel the need for speed.
Well, can I give you mine?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Go. Because then I've got a very quick footy question.
I want to be Richard Gere in Dirty Dancing. Love the music.
You do that today. Just look at you.
I just love the dancing. I like a good dance. And I mean, seriously, how'd you be?
Gere in Dirty Dancing.
What's what?
Richard Gere in Dirty Dancing.
Oh, the music just gets me going. No. He doesn't dance, but I just like I like a bit of a jig. He doesn't dance, but I just like the character.
Wait, shush. Richard Gere is not in Dirty Dancing.
No. What's the other? Am I confusing my movies? Not Richard Gere. What's his name?
Patrick Swayze.
Patrick Swayze. That's what I'm talking about.
You should say that, though, because you would 100% be able to pull off Richard Gere in Dirty Dancing, who just happened to walk into the wrong movie. That's what you'd be doing, mate.
Betty reckons that oh no, she's just contradicted me. She's just said with you, Patrick Swayze, everyone's gone hard on me. You've got the wrong movie, Tone.
That's your Richard Gere moment. Hey, one for me, mate. I was very fortunate enough to be at the football on the weekend where West Coast took on Geelong.
Oh, please. Is that necessary? Is that necessary?
Mate, that was sensational. It was a great game. It was. I was at Optus Stadium in the what's it called? In the locker room suite, basically. So the area where the players run in and out, and so it was awesome seats. I was there with a client from the office. I was literally right at the bounce down. In terms of right in line with the bounce down. It was a awesome weather night. Great result in the footy, obviously, and just a really, really great game to be at, where there was only 28,000 people or whatever. And Geelong played well, but weren't good enough on the night.
It's one that got away, mate. There's one that got away. I watched on TV. But I can also tell you before we finish up, not that anybody else really cares, but I'm playing tomorrow. I know it's Thursday, but I'm playing tomorrow afternoon my first round of 18 holes for nearly 12 months.
Mate,
so hole in one, here we come.
Yeah, almost. Maybe it'll be like where you almost got one. That is a very, very significant milestone for you, given where you've been over the last 7 or 8 months. So that's fantastic, mate. And I hope you make it through the 18, and I hope you almost get another hole in one.
I am playing with my doctor and one of my mates, so I'm sure they'll keep a good close eye on me, but looking forward to it. And, mate, been fabulous to catch up again. Laura, Dino, Betty, great to have you on board and really enjoyed your conversation. But, mate, tremendous. Look forward to next week. And Dean Stonehouse, I reckon his shoulder will be ready. He might be in a sling, but we look forward to talking to him and talking First Homebuyers next week. Mate, have a great week. And for all those that haven't joined us before, we'd love to keep you following. And we're now on Facebook page. We're also a YouTube channel, Property Avenue WA. It's Things Property. If you've got questions, if you're not sure, if you're buying a property, you're selling a property, you're renting a property, you've got questions, we would welcome your questions and we see if we can give you the answers. Take care. Have a great week. And OD, good to talk to you, bud.
Thanks, man.